I had that wow moment. Oh my God, this is going to quite disrupt the industry and everybody should be looking at that.
Hello and welcome to episode 10, season 1 of your Cyber Threat Intelligence podcast. Whether you're a seasoned CTI expert, a cybersecurity professional, or simply curious about the digital battlefield, our expert guests and host will break down complex topics into actionable insights. On this episode of Season 1, our host Pedro Kertzman will chat with Kees Pouw, who has over 20 years of experience in helping organizations excel in the areas of cybersecurity, risk management, and architecture. He was the co-founder and managing partner of iSecurity, a leading North American cybersecurity firm, developing custom-built solutions for many customers. Currently, as the CISO of one of the largest brokerage firms in Canada, he brings distinct insights into the cyber threat landscape and the steps that the organization can take to build world-class cyber resilience. Over to you, Pedro.
Kees, thank you so much for coming to the show. I'm really happy to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's exciting to be here and to be talking about cyber threat intelligence. I think it's a topic that, frankly, drives a lot of interest and excitement. Even when I need to talk to my executives, I can see that a lot of things related to cyber can be very boring to them. But when you start talking about cyber threat intelligence, they get excited, even though I think sometimes it's a little bit not clear what it is a bit mystic thing around it. So I'm happy to be here and clarify some of that and what it can do for you and what it cannot and what are the things that are available, right?
Awesome. Yeah, I cannot agree more. I think it's the topic's like super hot nowadays, especially when we start seeing the boundaries or blurred lines between intelligence in general, geopolitical stuff, how it translates into the cyber universe and the back and forth and all that. So probably that's why they get so excited when they start hearing the cyber consequences of some geopolitical decision or something like that. Again, thanks for coming to the show. And given your experience, I think it would be valuable for the listeners if you could bring, for example, what's the main value for an organization to build a CTI program? Any thoughts around that?
Very good question, right? To start off, why should we have a cyber threat intelligence program? And speaking from the perspective of a CISO, right? My current role in a mid-sized organization where we have to be very smart about where we apply our resources and what's going to bring good outcomes, right, for our security program. So I like to step back and think about art of war. In essence, I love those concepts. It's amazing to me that they are thousands of years old and applies to what we're trying to do, including in the cyber. And I'd like to start with the statement from Sun Tzu about if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you're going to win all battles. If you just know yourself, you don't know your enemy, you're going to win half of the battles and the other way around. If you know about your enemies, you don't know yourself, it's also half. If you don't know yourself and your enemy, you're really in bad luck, right? You're going to lose most of the battles. And
That's perfect.
Yeah, and the cyber threat intelligence is that half, is knowing about your enemy, is knowing what are their intent, what are their motivation, what are their capabilities, what techniques they use. And again, knowing that, I think you're going to be able to much better apply your resources when you're building your capabilities. And frankly, while it may sound very easy to know yourself, organizations are very complex, right?
That's right.
Right? So you don't have I don't step into this job and I get a list of all the applications that I have, everything that's externally exposed and what are all the data flows, everything documented. It's really not like that. So this is why getting to know your enemies and also having a view of your enemies on your infrastructure and how they can attack you, it becomes so important.
And I think another quote that also resonates to me, but maybe it will be like a follow-up on this one. After you know yourself and you know your enemy, it was kind of clear the quote-unquote value from a CTI perspective of that quote. The best wars are won even before they start. Right? So if you properly know you and your enemy, you won't actually have a war. They probably won't try to then translate it to CTI. They won't probably even try to go to your environment because just the way you're prepared for any particular tactics or methods they use to try to breach your environment, they will go there and just, that's going to be too hard. So they go elsewhere.
Yeah. So going back, the other one is to know your enemy, you have to become your enemy. So then
That's a nice one. Yeah.
That's another good one where cyber threat intelligence can provide you a lot of value. And I think what you mentioning as well is that if you won a battle when you don't even have the battle, right? Your enemy understands your capabilities, you know themselves, and they don't even try. And that's kind of ultimate goal. It's not to have a war at all because the enemy is going to go elsewhere. And I think this is very valid.
That's right.
In the cyberspace, because there's a lot of crimes of opportunity.
100%.
In continue with that, I can give specific examples where having good cyber threat intelligence help us focus our program. In my previous days, when I was running a lot of incident response, dealing with a lot of ransomware, we know that Lockbit goes after the VMware, the ESXi host, and they go there and then they encrypt the entirety of VMs, which is a very effective technique for them because it overwhelms. So when I start my new job, that's the first thing I'm going to look. Okay, let's protect the ESXi host because that's a place they're going to go after, right? Like if they breach my initial layers, that really informs the decisions that you have to make in terms where to put your scarce resources to a high effective protection.
Excellent.
Another example that I'm seeing now, we're seeing a lot of increased attacks with fake CAPTCHA. We've learned that from some feeds, and it's a lot of living off the land. And for those who are not familiar with it, it's using less of malware, but using the tools available. Let's call it dual use, where it's difficult because it could be an administrator or an engineer or a developer using these tools, but in fact could be hackers using like PowerShell being one good example. So in knowing that, our training program, the simulations we do are focused on that particular one as opposed to being too broad and generic.
Awesome.
Again, using resources in the most effective way because they're limited. Even the time of individuals where they're going to pay attention for your training program, the more you know, again, right, about your enemy, you're going to be deploying these resources. And as you mentioned, in this case, if we are well trained about these attacks and the users behave well, we're even not going to have any war, right, or any battle because it's won before it was fought. I think that's actually the quote. The battles are even before they're fought, right?
Yeah, because you're well prepared for it. That's a great point. You mentioned a few times about that equation to, especially for mid-sized organizations, budget, resources, best usage of those resources, so on and so forth. When it comes to a CTI program, any particular domains that you would focus with that resource constraint in mind? What would be the most valuable ones to have in place or invest in?
Very good question. So in accepting the importance of a program, I think the next question would be, what is it? What would characterize a cyber threat intelligence program? Before we answer which ones to start, I think it's worth spending some time clarifying what does it mean? Mm-hmm. What are the functionality we expect to have from a cyber threat intelligence program or platform? I think the first thing that comes to mind, at least to me anyway, again, I'm speaking this from more a management perspective than a technician or a very deep domain expert. It's about threat intelligence feeds. So I think this all started with, okay, so if people are threat actors are attacking, what are the IPs, what kind of domains they're using, and if there's malware, a lot of it was related to malware, kind of what hashes that we can go and find in the environment. This is kind of quite static type of information. Frankly, it's a whack-a-mole, and the industry has moved away from it, where we look more at behaviors and knowing the techniques. So it's kind of the more advanced. Mm-hmm. But that's how it starts. Threat intelligence feeds, then The other domain, it's about the dark web. To demystify this is people using servers, using anonymization techniques like what we call Tor nodes, where you cannot really trace it back. So it started with the intent of privacy, but it allows the creation of these sites where people can anonymously, fully anonymously, or extremely difficult to trace them, where they can just create forums and exchange information, and you can monitor for credentials. That's kind of the classical one, right? Like what kind of databases from previous breaches where dumps of credentials are exposed, or threat actors are exchanging information. You got to think threat actors are supply chain. Some people are just finding compromised credentials and selling them. Others are taking those credentials and executing ransomware. So it's a lot of exchange between them. So monitoring those sites to understand if your organization has any credentials, confidential information, or if there's any chatter or conversation about attacking the information. It could be people that sometimes people have been breached and they don't even know. If they go there and find out that a lot of information has been taken. Then there is what we call digital risk protection. It's just monitoring lookalike domains, people trying to fake they are your organization, for example, to do account takeovers or trick people into going there and providing their credentials, thinking they are the organization, and then subsequently using that. And the last element of that, attack surface management, what's called. It's more about vulnerability or identifying your assets, external assets and vulnerabilities associated with that, but from the perspective of an attacker, right? A threat actor. Not what you know internally, but what an attacker can see in terms of gathering intelligence and information about your organization. So basically, what do attackers can see about the environment? What are URLs? What are domains? Do they have any vulnerability associated to that? So to summarize, we're talking about threat intelligence feeds. We're talking about monitoring the dark web for any previous incident leaked information. We're talking about digital risk protections, like people faking to be you, and then attack surface, meaning how do they see your organization, your domains, and what vulnerabilities associated with that. So that's a kind of high level, what are the domains? So to go back to your question, where to start, I would start with the elements of the threat intelligence feed and the attack surface management, because they are very natural extension of your security operations center. I'm assuming any mid-sized organization would have one. Even the small ones these days, if they cannot have internally, they will have a third party which is monitoring their internal network, the logs, and looking for malicious activities in the environment. So that's kind of the internal part of things. So think of the cyber threat intelligence now monitoring the external side of things, right? Now you want to expand that monitoring of the internal assets, where are the logs, is there any abnormal behaviors there, and you want to say, okay, let's start monitoring on the outside things that are relevant to my inside, my assets. So again, the threat intelligence feeding into inside. Do I see any activity related to this malicious IP, URLs, or any hashes? And what are those assets that are exposed on the internet, what they look like, what attackers would see? Those are the two areas, right? Now, going into things like the dark web monitoring and digital risk protection, my suggestion would be, if you're just starting, is to get engaged with a third party, which could provide you a sample report or do a demo with one of the commercial tools. The vendors will be very happy to do a proof of value, right? To show it to you. In fact, sometimes we even get these emails, right? Oh, I found all these things on the dark web. Please have a look, right? Because they want to kind of scare you and show off the things that you may not know that's going on about potential leakage of information. And same related to the digital risk protection, right? Like you do a demo with those and then see what the value is, right? As I said, I would expand, the natural thing is expand some of the functions of your security monitoring system, assign somebody full-time or partially to start looking into these domains and seeing what the value is. And they will have different, depends on your business as well. So if you are offering a lot of digital services, right? Like if you have a customer portal for example, and a large number of people using that portal, digital risk protection is something you want to look into. Otherwise, you're going to potentially, like, for example, as we are a financial institution, this prevents fraud. Accounting word, it's mainly used for fraud. There's a big element of financial motivation, talking about knowing your enemy, right? There's a lot element of financial motivation, and the threat actors are really trying to monetize against you. So I think that gives you kind of summarizing. Spend your SIEM, your SOC with the threat intelligence and attack surface management, because they're very important things to do anyway. And then the dark web, digital risk protection, and even if when we look at those are things you may want to start with a third party, and then if you like, you buy the platform that then you need to train and get somebody to dedicate more time to it.
Perfect. And I love the way you put it, the supply chain on the threat actor side, working together in different areas of expertise to kind of leverage each other's knowledge when it comes to an attack plan or something like that. They don't try anymore to know every single area within the cybersecurity space. They're just super specialized on like credential stealing or ransomware or web app application exploits and you name it. So they're kind of and they also, get together on this sort of a supply chain, as you mentioned, to try to go after their targets. That's a really nice way to put it.
Yeah, they're trading, right? So as people in the real world realize I'm good in something, and then I specialize on that something, and then I start trading, right? Like I got these credentials, then the other one is really good at creating like software development. So they would do ransomware platform where somebody can just use that for the sake of doing the encryption and the negotiation and whatnot, while people specialize in getting that initial access to begin with, which provides you an opportunity. If credentials of access to environment exist and somebody's offering it, and if we infiltrate that, we would be able to prevent that. That's another aspect of it, where you can prevent a situation from happening. Again, to your point earlier, you win the battle even before you killing that aspect of the kill chain, right?
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's a good point for us to talk about what are the challenges. So speaking about all of these great capabilities and the benefits, but as everything else, it has its disadvantages and challenges, right? And the first thing that comes to mind, if we think about what we're talking about, like the internal and external, and cyber threat intelligence being focused on the external, you can imagine the volume of information that you're talking about.
That's right.
All the forms that exist, the ones that you know of, the ones that you don't know of yet. So we're really talking about with huge amount of information that needs to be processed, validated to be meaningful, and the amount of false positives that you can get. So I gave the example earlier of somebody saying, "Oh, I found a bunch of these credentials in the dark web," and you now have to go and validate, are these valid or not, or is this documentation really mine or not? Is it really confidential? So you can spend a lot of time dealing with false positives. And I have a term that I use to my team, like it's chasing ghost, right? You're really chasing a ghost. It's not relevant because the information, the intelligence, it has to be relevant, it has to be timely, and it has to have be impactful to something you do. And quite often it's not. It's zero information. It may be a list of people that are not with you anymore. Accounts are not active. And if you're talking about thousands of them, you're going to have to reconcile that information. And sometimes you spend a lot of time and you does not really yield anything. So it has an element of hit and miss that I believe that it's a drawback of it. And if you have to focus, like you just think about like the internal information about the internal, your SOC is something it's there, you control, while the information out there, it's something that's somewhat outside of your control. So you have to balance that, right? Like you have to have the ability to quickly filter through that. And it goes back to having developing some skill set where a good integration with the internal team, and also have a good handle about your assets information, which is a good thing to have anyway, and you need it for your internal protection. The other challenge will be costs. So if you move into a commercial platform, they're not cheap, they're expensive, and the cost can add up. Now, the platform, the cost of an analyst, and if you're not yielding that actionable, impactful kind of intelligence, you may not be getting the full return on investment, right? So that's the kind of challenge and the pitfall, right, that I see.
Awesome. Now that, let's say, we know the recommendations of the three or some of the main domains to have on a CTI program, some of the drawbacks. Let's say the company is growing. They are thinking about, okay, so maybe it's time to really start a CTI program. Where is like ground zero kind of thing? Would you recommend, start your CTI program from your experience by doing this part of the equation and building from that kind of thing? Any thoughts around that?
Sure. I think you would two kind of different approaches you can take, right? So more in the line that I suggested and that I frankly like it more is to expand an existing capability. So it would start with your security operations center team and expand those functionalities into attack surface management, as I said, the threat feeds, and grow from there, right?
Awesome.
I think that's a kind of organic growth, or you could just go to the market and acquire a cyber intelligence team, right? You just say, okay, I'm going to get somebody who has the experience on this, and then bring a person, and then they start building a team that's high specialized. So it's a question of a budget. Very rarely in my career, I said, okay, now you have a couple $1 million to start this program, but it does happen, right? If that's the case, that's kind of different approach where you can then build the program with that intent of building a sophisticated cyber threat intelligence as opposed to growing what you have. The other aspect of it is what are the skill sets? Like, who are we going to assign to this function? And as I said, most likely somebody from SOC that can be expanded to the role. It could be as well somebody from an offensive team that can go there. I think the minimal knowledge that somebody has to have is have a good understanding of threats, understanding of, even I'll take a step back, right? Like having a good understanding of networking, how the attacks work, some understanding of coding application, a very structured mind in terms of doing investigations and looking at things from an evidence perspective. It's very helpful. Some past experience in dealing with incidents. That's why I kind of say SOC, very analytical role that you can connect the dots and sift through the information and make the right conclusions. As I said, you can get information overload. I find some people are not really good at this because they start going crazy. They start speculating. They don't follow the evidence.
The bias.
And they go, and they go nuts, right? They start making stories on their head, and then you say, "What evidence do you have?" Oh, it was an insider threat. Okay, but there's no evidence of insider threat here. Human brain is very interesting, right? Like we're good large language models, right? Like you have these blanks and try to fill the blank, right? It doesn't have the information, start making up information, start hallucinating to a degree.
That's right.
So it's kind of the way I see it. And then I like to pair a lot the cyber threat intelligence team with the offensive team because they should be sharing a lot of information. Right now, we're talking about more sophisticated. Is about knowing the techniques, the methods, is moving beyond that initial baseline of looking static information and doing search on environment. It's about, okay, what are the techniques that are exploitable and which ones we have to worry about and which ones are being used, and are they relevant into our environment, and putting the focus to fixing those, right? Again, so is it relevant? We see it out there that threat actors are using a lot. We know that this applies to us, so let's go and fix it, right?
That's awesome. That's super insightful. Thank you. Okay, I think that's a good understanding for people, best practices, how to create your own CTI program. And one thing that it might like pepper into many of different aspects of our previous conversation, and it's probably the acronym of the moment kind of thing. How you see agentic AI improving or changing, or how do you see agentic AI within the CTI or cybersecurity context? What is your perspective on it?
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you brought that up. Overall, I believe AI or agentic AI in particular, it's gonna disrupt our industry. I think it's disrupting many industries, and maybe I'll start from what my view was when we first got to know about ChatGPT. That was that wow moment. First, of course, you're so amazed by what it can do. I look at this movie from called Hidden Figures. It's a bunch of black women, right, that were working for NASA, and they were calculators. And it was difficult for them, and difficult for them to show their value in a white kind of male-dominated industry.
I remember, yeah.
But the core of the story was that we had a profession called a calculator, which what these ladies were really doing. And they basically did the calculations, right? Like they want to calculate the trajectory, whatever that is, and then they went do all this math, and then they brought the IBM computer. Forgot the name of the model, but that was the first one. So, and the leader of that group, she was so smart, said, "We got to learn this thing because this is going to replace us." Bottom line, you don't have a profession called a calculator anymore, right? Because the computer does the calculator. So when ChatGPT came, I said, okay, now this thing can write better than I can write, right? Especially English being my second language. So now the thing can code as better than many people. So now you see how it can transform and even change the professions that exist. We don't have calculators as a profession anymore, and now people may be worried about copywriters and even developers, right? They may not be professions. But when it comes to cyber, one thing that I was really not thinking of the potential is because of hallucination, right? I said, oh, this thing can just made up. We need something that is precise. Is this a threat, not a threat? But agentic AI changed that. Now we pairing a large language model where they can make calls to functions, look at this large amount of data. I think this is going to be super helpful for cyber threat intelligence, because you're going to be able to create agents that can be doing specific tasks. We have ways of eliminating by query your own information, validating and making API calls so that AI can orchestrate this and really do what it's really good at without hallucinating and automating the task. So I'll give you one particular example, right? Something that I'm experimenting with my team. So we talked about attack surface management. And it's a very simple example because I wanted people to visualize this. We have a URL that exposed externally, or let's put it in a different way. We find a bunch of vulnerabilities that our endpoints report. Some can be executed. Now the question is, okay, are these exposed externally or not? And if you happen to have a load balancer, what is exposed externally has like a virtual IP that maps to a bunch of the internal IPs, and that's the report that we get. So then somebody has to go and get that information from the device and do a mapping. Okay, we have these vulnerabilities. Are they linked to this virtual IP, meaning they expose external, right? That's a very simple thing. The analysts can do it, and you can do that programmatically as well. But with AI, what we are doing is that now we can just ask the question, I have these IPs, go to the load balancer, and we have this thing called Model Context Protocol, which is MCP, which even means we don't really need to understand how the interface is, just in natural language. Say go, and the large language model then is able to really understand the API, go get that information and with the instructions and the prompt that you provided, it can easily map that. It's a very simple thing. It's something a human can do, but you need somebody who needs to understand the syntax, somebody who needs to understand the device and how to get that information to do that dynamically. Now we can have an agent that does that. Very simple, using common tools that are available now. So this is a reality. Now you can extrapolate this to all the things we talked about. We're doing an agent where now we get a vulnerability. We want to go and to specific forums in the dark web. Are threat actors actually using this as we speak? And then if it does, add a higher criteria to it. And if it does, do we have it internally? And if it does it have? So you can create all these workflows that, and we can do it with AI. Again, it's something that experts can do, something that you can do programmatically, but you can do much faster with AI, and you can do it in a way that you can augment your staff. You can do it in a way that it's easy to program, so you don't have to write so many lines of code. You don't have to worry about if the API changes now, a little field change here, the whole structure of the program breaks, right? So to me, in short answer is yes. I think it's gonna disrupt. The potential is huge that a lot of these tasks and that information overload that I'm mentioning can be done through agents, and that's so much more cost effective than having a bunch of experts. Of course, we're still at the very beginning of this. I have questions about the cost, because if you have this huge amount of information and you have to pass that information to the large language model or tokens, that's how tokens for simplicity would be like a word. So if you're passing a lot of that information, it can have a huge cost. So we can think, to draw a parallel is cloud, right? When cloud came and everybody, initially they were just moving and lift and shift from their data centers to the cloud, but then you have the cloud native solutions. And now in AI, they call AI first. So basically you develop things with agents using a large language model. You don't do it in the traditional computing way, as I mentioned, right? At attack surface, you can do that very programmatically using the techniques, coding techniques, but you can do an agent, as the example I provide. But now you may start spending so much money with it. Same thing with the cloud, that you may have to DEI what you did because you can't afford paying this large language model. And then there's a whole discussion. I don't want to get into a tangent. You see, I get quite excited about this because it took me a while to see the potential, I have to admit. But when I saw the first agents and the concept of MCP, that I had that wow moment. Oh my God, this is going to quite disrupt the industry, and everybody should be looking at that. As I said, there's many challenges. We're just testing this, so how accurate we can get. But I'm pretty confident, especially when we're talking about more junior to intermediate staff. I think it can do as good as a job as those, and then pass along to the more senior people. So quite a lot of automation is going to happen in this field. It's very information rich. And I was even thinking about, could you train a model with, it may be very expensive, right? But you could potentially train the model with all the information that exists in the dark web, because the models that we have today are trained with obviously not with the dark web information. But then there's the side of it, right? Maybe the attackers are going to do that. Thankfully, this is quite expensive to train a model. We're talking about millions of dollars, but a very sophisticated attacker or companies that are specialized on this, they could be doing that as well. So it could be feeding and retraining, and you just be asking this information using natural language, and everything that we talked about here about leakages could just be provided. That's a potential scenario.
That's awesome. And thanks for putting into such a easy way to understand. I appreciate that. I agree. I think also with LLMs or even agents now, like typewriters back in the day, now the computers come in. You don't need, whenever you type like a mistake, you don't need to rip off a paper, start from the get-go. So you just hit delete and then you start from there. So just expedite, gives more scale to your work. Like you mentioned, CTI specifically, we handle a massive amount of data. Humans are not meant to handle like the amount of data computers can do. but then agents and LLMs, they can do that. So working hand in hand, I think it's going to be at scale. It's going to be the benefits of it. I 100% agree. It's going to be really interesting to see in the future. It's happening, but even more so, we're going to have a better grasp in the short term, I would say.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's already here, but we're just starting to explore, to reap all the benefits. Maybe I'll just comment on another element of the challenge. AI can be quite difficult to understand and have traceability.
Mm-hmm.
Why it does. So that's another thing, that having to understand why I gave this answer, so that and now we have layers upon layers of not understanding how it works, right? Like you could have a code generator through tools like Cursor that then generates like your MCPs, that interface that I talked about, that people don't know how it was coded because it wasn't a human. And now we have the LLMs make these decisions that we don't have a full understanding why, to a degree, right? Why it does. So there's even areas of research, a lot of research now, because we kind of create this, call it a monster, and now we're trying to understand exactly how the monster is. It's so complex as the way the neural networks and what we call parameters, billions of them, and trying to understand why it given an answer A and not B. Fully understanding that is something that we trying to grasp at this point. So a lot of very exciting from my point of view, because I myself like disruption. It brings so much opportunity. It's dangerous too. You can be left behind, but it brings a lot of green field for people to explore.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Any, especially if it's open source, like tools that you see, or maybe methodologies that you see that are useful for CTI teams to handle all that information on a variety of sources and all that?
Yeah, no, I can give it some hints here, and to be honest, I have my notes here, which don't have to hide, because this is what I talk to my analysts. I think I'll start saying there's tons of tools, right? Like there's tons of open source tools available there. Things like Feedly, which is like a newsfeed aggregator. We have hundreds of sources. We have blogs like Kevin Beaumont as an example. Open intelligence platforms like Google Docs. There are many more examples. And then VirusTotal, URL scans, the abuse.pdb. The list goes on and on. And we have as well CTI sharing communities like Alien Vault, the Open CTI. There's the MISP project, right, which stands for Malware Information Sharing Platform.
Mm-hmm.
Database, Malware Bazaar, URL halls, and some basic tools that people need to learn how to do, right? The DNS to passive tools such as Wiz and slookups, and as I mentioned, very important so that you understand how DNS and the networks work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this quite a lot. Sense has a conference as well, which is this awesome Cyber Threat Intelligence Summit. I think it happens every year and a half or so, with amazing speakers and a lot of introductories and free courses available for folks. I think maybe we can, I don't know how we put the podcast, but we maybe can put some links associated with, you can go and have a look. But there's lots of resources, right? And any using something like Gemini or ChatGPT to ask what the sources are, you're going to get tons of it. Like there's not lack of available materials there. You may just get stuck with the challenge of where to start and not get overwhelmed, right, by the number of platforms that exist. So Shodan, actually, it's one tool that I like. It's kind of paid, but it's not that expensive in the attack surface. So you want to start learning about what exists about your environment. It's a very good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go as well, do some demos. As I mentioned, some of the commercial tools available. I'm not making any or endorsing any tool, but takes record future cyber they will happily go and allow you to check and validate their platforms. People would learn a lot, right, just by going through there and get a sense what are the things that they provide you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks for mentioning that. And yeah, absolutely, we can put some links on the description of the episode. I appreciate it again, Case. So you mentioned like a quite a lot, and we can see the variety of knowledge you're bringing related to CTI, and not specifically like consuming the information on threat reports and let's say more dedicated sources like this. Do you have any recommendations where to go as a learning source from an overall CTI standpoint, like frameworks, new practices, things that would not be on the threat report, for example, but about CTI in general? Any places or people to follow or blogs, you name it, conferences, like you said, since CTI, I think it was a few months ago. Any other sources to learn CTI?
Yeah, I think beyond that, I mentioned, right, like Sense is a very good one. Just to reiterate, right? I think ArcX has some free courses as well. But I want to go back to the very basics. So if you really want to start on this, I think you should really understand the MITRE attack and the cyber kill chain. And even prior to that, people should have good knowledge of networking and should have a very solid foundation about that. And then programming and understanding minimum of hacking. Like even myself, I don't really get into that depth, but have an understanding injection of code versus something that's more indirect, like cross-site scripting. What are the top attack techniques that OWASP be common? I think those are very good because those are the techniques, right, that your officers use. I think you need to get familiar, at least conceptually, in order to make good understanding. And I mentioned about the MITRE, which is the attack phases, which is linked to the kill chain. Have a good understanding of that. I think those are very foundational elements that people should have before they start trying to consume all this information specific to cyber threat intelligence. And then I believe if you want to become very specialized, now we're talking about more advanced hacking techniques and analyzing malware and understanding their behavior would be kind of the more advanced specialized fields, right? That people can apply, and there's plenty of courses and certifications that you can go to get specialized even in malware analysis and whatnot.
Awesome. Wow, super insightful. I really appreciate, Case. Any final thoughts? Things that we didn't mention during the previous topics?
No, I think that's I think it's a good segue into kind of wrapping it up, right? I think it's just to summarize, in order to have a effective and efficient as well, right? Like it's something that works, that protects the organization, and is something that you put your efforts where you should be doing. So it speaks about efficiency. You need to have some elements of a cyber threat intelligence. One thing that I did not mention is that we'll start with that, but we did not elaborate much. Is now the executives, even the board of directors of organizations, they're expecting somebody to have, or any cyber program to have some element of that, to speak about the threats that organizations are facing, and they expect even to be provided with a report. So it's very important. We touched upon as well what is the balance and how to start expanding from your secure operations center into the attack surface, which kind of have an overlap, and going beyond into what's completely outside your perimeter, which is the dark web, and also people that are trying to fake you or go against your brand by faking websites or lookalike domains. And one point that we did not mention that I see a lot of attacks now is like malvertising. So even if they don't have a domain lookalike, they may be paying like Google. So when somebody Googles the name of your organization or your product, they get a malicious link instead of going to your website, right? And it's about account takeover. What some people don't know is even if you have multi-factor authentication, or if you're sending, if you have a complete man in the middle, you can actually bypass that, because you have someone that is just in between the attack, and especially if you're using something like SMS or even an authenticator, you completely hijacking that session, so you'll be able to take the session of the user and whatever you're trying to do, right? Like do a transaction that staff or and whatnot. So those are goes into the second level of your maturity in your program. And unless you have a lot of budget, I would start that, expand from the internal, and then goes into those more sophisticated. And lastly, you really have to be paying attention to AI. And I recommend, if you have the resource, not just be looking for buying tools, but have the team understand. Because if you have one good resource, you're going to be able to augment. I think this is a reality that's already there. Overall, I think thanks for bringing this topic to the forefront. I hope we have help folks look into this, demystify a little bit, and understand a little bit more about what works and what doesn't from our real perspective of running a program, right? And having to deal with the challenges of which functions to enhance, which ones that we're gonna put the efforts towards.
That's perfect, Kees. I really appreciate it. Super insightful conversation, especially for folks looking from a executive level like yourself to build those programs or enhance the CTR program. It was great. I really appreciate all the insights, and I hope I'll see you around.
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity once more.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Got thoughts or questions? Connect with us on our LinkedIn group, Cyber Threat Intelligence Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. If you know anyone with CTI expertise that would like to be interviewed in the show, just let us know. Until next time, stay sharp and stay secure.